President Buhari meets Attorney General of the Federation, expresses concern over non-usage of recovered assets.
Zungeru hydroelectricity power project have slowly resumed after years of suspension.
Speed up construction of Mambila hydropower project. Senate advises federal government as House of Reps wants review of minimum wage.
Insecurity challenges, Nigeria police partners United States Embassy to build more capacity.
And today on Good Morning Nigeria, we focus on the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Nigeria.
Well, Kingsley, the issue of small arms and light weapons remains one that no country can be excused in West Africa, even extending beyond Africa.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Nigeria's case, of course, it's of great concern, which is why we are taking a look at the subject matter today.
And that's why the pockets of uprising we have here and there can be attributed to that. You know.
Absolutely. That's according to what the experts also say.
Yeah.
No, that's...
Well, the interception of over 600 pump-action rifles, large enough to equip an army battalion by officers and men of the Nigerian Customs earlier in the year, again brought to the fore the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Nigeria, a development that many believe is fueling conflicts, crimes, and other social vices across the country.
You're quite right, Cliff. I mean, just the seizure you refer to of the over 600 pump-action rifles seized by the Nigerian Customs was one of several seizures that we have seen in recent times. You also recall that there were 13 containers loaded with rockets and grenades shipped into the country from Iran, together, of course, with the importation of other firearms, gas masks, and bulletproof vests intercepted at the Tinkan Island port in Lagos.
Yes, Kingsley, when we talk about all this, you know, it gives one a serious concern that these things are allowed to come through our borders and without checking such proliferation. Well, these are well-known incidents that showed how illicit weapons are being smuggled into the country, which also explain why Nigeria is said to be awash with illicit weapons circulating in unauthorized hands and non-state actors, consequently threatening peaceful coexistence, lives and property of the citizenry.
Well, in addition to the illicit weapons that are smuggled into the country, we also have those that are locally produced. Now, the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons in 2015 revealed that about 40% of illegal weapons in Nigeria are indeed made in the country. A statement that has, of course, been proved by the occasional raids that we have seen on such places where they are produced by security agencies.
Indeed, this development has made the military to lament over the influx of illegal aliens, arms, ammunition, and improvised explosive devices, IED materials, into Nigeria and through porous borders, saying they posed serious challenge to the effort to combat terrorism, adding that most arms and ammunition brought into the country were through Malian and Libyan rebels who were desperate to exchange arms for money.
All right. Well, in August last year, that is in August 2016, the United Nations, indicated that, look, if you're taking a look of the illegal light weapons and arms that are available in West Africa, some 70% of such weapons can, in fact, be found in Nigeria, whatever the figures are, because they are illicit and they are in wrong hands.
You know, when we talk about these Malians and Libyan rebels, and
yes.
I wonder how their route, the movement, is it by sea, by land, and all that? Or do they fly into the country?
Well, these are the issues that the experts on the program, will have to have the opportunity of explaining, to our viewers. So quite obviously, there are gun runners, who get these things from the sources and then, of course, sell them to willing buyers also in Nigeria. But 70% of illicit small arms and light weapons, according to the UN, can be found in Nigeria.
Well, Nigeria, indeed, the Sahel region, is said to be experiencing some of the most devastating effects of proliferation of small arms and light weapons as a result of spillover effect of recent crises in Libya and Mali, as well as unresolved internal conflicts in different parts of the country, such as the Boko Haram in the northeast, militants in the Niger Delta, and communal clashes in southern region of the country.
It is pretty clear, therefore, that if left unchecked, the scourge of illicit small arms and light weapons will jeopardize the development that the country strives to attain. This is quite obvious in terms of what we find if the conflicts continue to persist. Obviously, with conflict in place, then there can be no production. And when there is no production, there can be no economic growth. And without growth, you can also have development.
Well, all this has its own telling effects on the economy of any nation, because if you don't have peace and security, you will not be able to plan out and execute programs that has positive impact on the nation. And how do illicit firearms and find their ways into the hands of unlicensed and unauthorized users, including non-state actors? Why are these weapons imported, and for what and for whom? Where are they sourced, and what are the guiding factors for the procurement of firearms? What is the role played by security operatives at the country's borders and ports in restocking illicit arms in the country?
All right, now these and other questions we'll be seeking answers to from the guests who will be joining us later on in the course of the program as we focus on the proliferation of small arms and light weapons and what is being done to reduce drastically the number, as well as obviously the impact of the consequences rather we just talked about now of persons possessing these weapons without authorization. Now this is Good Morning Nigeria, and I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I welcome you to this edition of the program, reaching you as always live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I am Cliff Ayoze. Thanks for joining us on the program. In the course of the program, we shall take our complimentary segments: newspaper review, business, sports, developments on the foreign scene, arts and entertainment news, and even the weather outlook for the rest of the day. For now, we'll join Laure Bala Hassan for the day's news. Good morning, Laure.
Good morning, Cliff and Kingsley. Hello, and thanks for joining us on the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed serious concern that critical national assets recovered from those who abused trust by anti-graft agencies are yet to be fully mobilized to put to effective use for public good. This was when he granted audience to the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, to chart the best way forward. State House correspondent Adam Musambo reports that the president also received the Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Dr. Mekanti Baru.
Mr. President is worried that the assets gathered over time by the agencies of government and that are responsible for the fight against corruption are scattered all over the place, and embedded in the proceeds of crime bill that is pending before the National Assembly. The whole essence of the meeting is considering the possibility of splitting the Proceeds of Crime Act to take the Asset Management Committee out of it so that it can be given special treatment. Mr. President, as you rightly are aware, is committed to open government partnership, is open to transparency and accountability. So the Asset Management Agency is intended to provide all that by way of having in place a specialized agency of government that will be responsible for the management of all the assets that are recovered through the process of fight against corruption.
Meanwhile, it could be recalled that in a message to the Workers' Day rally, President Muhammadu Buhari reiterated federal government's commitment towards addressing the issue of wages and welfare of the nation's workforce.
The first thing that might have shocked you was that 27 out of the 36 states couldn't pay salaries. This is a disgrace to Nigeria. It's a disgrace. Up to now, some of the states cannot pay salaries.
In the meantime, the House of Representatives has emphasized the need for a review of the national minimum wage as the imperative of the time to enhance productivity of workers. This came in a matter of urgent public importance, moved by the Chairman House Committee on Labour, Representative Onyewuchi Ezenwa, as members reflect on Workers' Day.
there is a correlation between a productive workforce and economic growth. It's a serious issue that we all must listen and must support this motion.
The Minimum Wage Act that went through in 2011 that created the 18,000 naira minimum wage be activated immediately.
We are committed to ensuring that not only minimum wage is increased, but a living wage.
The Senate is to constitute an ad hoc committee to pursue the realization of the Mambila and Zungeru hydroelectric power projects. National Assembly correspondent Waziri Zayanu reports that the Senate decision followed a motion sponsored by Senator Yusuf Abubakar Yusuf from Taraba Central on the urgent need to speed up construction of 3,050 megawatts Mambila and 700 megawatts Zungeru projects.
100 megawatts Zungeru hydroelectricity power project have slowly resumed after years of suspension.
The federal government has commenced consensus building with experts and critical players in and outside the government to ensure the successful delivery and implementation of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan roadmap. Budget and National Planning Minister Udo Doma, who said this at the opening of a stakeholders dialogue in Abuja, says Nigeria's debt service to revenue ratio will reduce as revenue improves.
Implementation, we're not waiting. It's a continuing process. As we are going ahead, we are implementing. And as we're implementing, we make adjustments when necessary. It's important that every step of the way we consult, get a feedback. Where adjustments have to be made, we make those adjustments every step of the way.
Minister of State for Petroleum Resources Ibe Kachuku has challenged oil and gas experts and investors to take advantage of the over $50 billion investment opportunities captured in Nigeria's oil and gas sector roadmap to advance government's 4-year economic recovery and growth plan. This was at the 2017 Offshore Technology Conference in Houston, Texas.
Relevance for how we're able to provide the necessary funding for the federal government to survive. And we took the bold step this year of saying to the government, rather than take a loan, we would like to look internally, working with NNPC and DPR to raise over 10 billion into the federal coffers to strengthen our reserves and help our budget, and work far gone in that.
Nigeria Police says it is partnering with the United States Embassy to build more capacity to overcome security challenges, especially that of the northeast of the country. Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris stated this at the inauguration of U.S. Police Advisor's Office located at the force headquarters. Edino Justice reports that U.S. Ambassador to Nigeria performed the ceremony. Former Jigawa State Governor Sule Lamido has been arraigned before a magistrate court for alleged inciting supporters of the PDP to disrupt the conduct of the forthcoming local government elections slated for the 1st of July 2017. Magistrate Usman Muhammad ordered that the former governor be remanded in prison custody till Thursday, the 4th May 2017, when his bail application will be heard.
For ruling on the bail application, so we've adjourned to 4th day of May. Has the discretion to refuse or to grant the bail, or grant the bail on self-recognition or upon conditions be met. But if you decide not to grant bail, there are other avenues for us to explore.
The Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, has announced a tripartite partnership involving his ministry, UN World Tourism Organization, and global news leader CNN to leverage on Nollywood to promote tourism in Nigeria. The minister announced the plan at the annual general meeting of the Nigerian Association of Tour Operators in Lagos. The minister said that talks are at an advanced stage to forge a strong and effective partnership by using comparative advantage in film production through Nollywood to promote tourism in Nigeria, explaining that the path has not been trodden before and that it will go a long way in making it possible for tourism to thrive from the back burner to mainstream of the economy. He appealed to tourism stakeholders to work with the federal government to ensure the success of the 2018 UN WTO CAF meeting scheduled to hold in Nigeria. The minister urged the private sector to partner with the government to grow the tourism industry and provide the necessary skills, competencies, and ingredients for growth and progress. And that's it on the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Cliff and Kingsley after this break. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. Now, talking business, the Central Bank of Nigeria has expelled all but 8 banks from the wholesale foreign exchange window, spot and forwards for deliberately frustrating efforts by small and medium-scale enterprises to access foreign exchange from the new forex window. Plus, business news on Nigerian capital market records 3 months rising streak following the Central Bank of Nigeria's decision to boost portfolio investment. All with Leah Katun Babatunde.
Nigerian stocks hit a 3-month high on Tuesday, lifted by company earnings results that outperformed market expectations and hopes that a new currency trading window will help lure investors back to Africa's biggest economy. In a boost for investors in Nigerian equities, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, last week allowed portfolio investors to trade the naira currency at a market-determined exchange rate and increase dollar sales on the interbank market. After the slump in the global price of oil, the central bank imposed a raft of capital controls to protect its dwindling hard currency reserves. The market's oil share index rose 0.77% to 25,965.18 points, led higher by banking and oil stocks. Market capitalization, on the other hand, rose to 8.974 trillion naira. 191 equities swept hands in 3,392 deals valued at 2.129 billion naira. Zenith Bank, GTB and WAPIC led activities during the session. The green flank was led by Fitson Healthcare, Nigeria Police Force Microfinance Bank and FBN Holdings, while the reds were topped by UACN, Jaiz Bank and Forte Oil. Oil prices steadied on Tuesday as lower production by Russia and major OPEC exporters balanced news of higher output in the United States, Canada and Libya. Benchmark Brent crude oil was down 10 cents at $51.42 a barrel by 13.45 GMT. The futures contract hit a one-month low of $50.45 last week after the restart of 2 Libyan oil fields. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and other producers, including Russia, have agreed to cut output by 1.8 million barrels per day for the first half of 2017 to try to reduce a global glut. OPEC oil output fell for a fourth straight month in April. A Reuters survey showed on Tuesday, dropping to 31.97 million barrels per day as Nigeria and Libya pumped less crude. Energy Ministry data showed on Tuesday that Russian oil production fell slightly last month to 11 million barrels per day, almost hitting its output target under the deal with OPEC. Now, OPEC and other producers plan to meet on May 25 and are widely expected to keep output limits for the rest of the year. Now, moving on, some 1.4 million children in drought-hit Somalia are projected to suffer acute malnutrition this year. Marixi Mercado, United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF spokesperson, told reporters in Geneva the 1.4 million projected includes 275,000 severely malnourished. This is the most severe form of malnutrition, the kind that takes children 9 times more likely to die of diseases such as cholera or measles or even malaria.
UNICEF, we treat the most severe cases of malnutrition. So that number that you have in the press release of 56,000 are children that we have already treated since the beginning of the year.
The combination of drought, disease, and displacement are deadly for children. Around 615,000 people, the vast majority of them women and children in Somalia, have been displaced by drought since November 2016. New population movements will further aggravate the situation, according to UNICEF experts. Those who remain at home will need urgent assistance so that they do not flee, and those who have already fled are now in camps and are extremely vulnerable, children most of all. Early planning and funding has made possible a significant scale-up in UN assistance to Somalia. The World Bank Group has set a target to end poverty and hunger by 2030.
All right, thank you very much, Leah Katung Babatunde, for the business package. Next for us, we'll take a look at the headlines on the front pages of some of the papers we have with us.
You're on to Good Morning Nigeria, and it's time to look at what the papers are saying. And joining us to look at the stories trending in today's dailies is our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyobi. It's our pleasure to have you again.
Thank you, Cliff. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Kingsley, I think you have to kickstart this.
Well, yes, let's take a look at the lead story on the front page of the New Telegraph. New Telegraph is the first paper we're looking at this morning. It says, Buhari's health, not too bad, says wife. Details of the story can be found on page 2. Now, on page 2 of the New Telegraph, there are other writers, of course, to that lead headline. And one of them says, what President told us, by AGF and NNPC boss. AGF stands for Attorney General of the Federation. And why OBJ and IBB met, and APC, Afenifere, ACF, SAGE, and lawyers speak on Akonde's statement. As indicated, the details of the story are on page 2 of the New Telegraph. That story is similarly on the front page of the Authority newspaper. In fact, it's the second lead at the bottom half of the Authority newspaper. It says, Buhari resumes work, receives briefs with a rider not as ill as perceived, and that's attributed to his wife. Now, the other headlines, returning again to the New Telegraph, other headlines on the front page of New Telegraph, immediately below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, court remands ex-governor Sule Lamido in prison. Details of that story are on page 34. And kinsmen proud of Joshua and planned big for the champion. That's Anthony Joshua, the reigning heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And then you also have their prisoner bags additional 162 years for defrauding banker. Details of the story on page 9. And Senate backtracks and considers Rex and ambassadorial nominees. Rex, of course, stands for Resident Electoral Commissioners. Details of the story on page 3 of the New Telegraph. Now, above the nameplate of the New Telegraph, a story on the oil industry, JV debts, that's joint venture debts. Federal government pays $400 million to Shell, Chevron, and ExxonMobil, as well as others. With the rider, reps reject relocation of IOC's headquarters to Niger Delta. Now, let's go to the front page still. We have the photographs on the composite of photographs on the front page of the New Telegraph with the caption, sorry state of Apapa Oshodi Road. Actually, it's an expressway. There are two major ports on that axis. You have the Tinkan port and the Apapa ports. The sorry state of the road, as you can see from the photographs right there on the front pages, and we are not in the thick of the rainy season just yet. Now, also below that is a headline on the economy. CBN bars 18 banks from SMEs Forex windows. CBN bars 18 banks from SMEs Forex windows. Details on page 3. And non-O blood group increases heart attack risk. Details of that on page 6. Cliff.
So if you don't have O blood group,
well, they can find out the details of.
Okay. Moving on now, we go to This Day. On the front page of This Day this morning, we have Buhari resumes, means AGF and NPC GMD may attend council meeting today. Accuses National Assembly of not passing laws to strengthen anti-graft war. And Oshimbajo panel to submit report today. Also, crude oil production put at 2 million barrels per day. And also on that, we have under the nameplate, presidential initiative for Northeast probe. Senate committee indicts Babachir, demands his prosecution. With details of that report on page 11. And on top of the nameplate, we have Central Bank of Nigeria sanctions 14 banks for crowding out SMEs in Forex market. Well, the other paper has 18 banks.
18, that's right.
I think we have about 22. We're going to talk about that. And pumps $196 million as foreign investors key into Forex window. And also we have on top of the nameplate, Anyoko Bags Akinyemi says federal government should stop leaks on NIA. That's the National Intelligence Agency, with details on page 11. And still trending on the front page, we have the president's wife comments there. Aisha Buhari breaks silence, says her husband's health is not that bad. ACF frowns at speculations on president's health. And we also have fire guards Akiolu's palace as staff lead monarch to safety, with details on page 48. But the picture story on the front page of This Day this morning is talking about promoting Nigeria to the world. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Kechukwu Enalama, with Federal Chancellor and head of the Federal Department of Economic Affairs, Education and Research of Switzerland. And that's during a bilateral meeting on investment in Switzerland. Well, we have similar story on the Daily Trust, where we talk about Buhari to preside over FEC meeting today. That's under the nameplate of Daily Trust this morning. And we also have the major story, suspended SGF collected 500 million kickbacks, Senate. Oshibajo panel submits report today. I think we'll stop there to get your comments on what is on the lead today.
Yes, most of the papers are carrying the story of the wife of the president, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, who says the health of her husband is not as bad as people are portraying it. She tweeted that the president has continued to carry out his responsibility as president of Nigeria. She said she tweeted at 6:22 p.m. He is currently in a meeting with the Minister of Justice and the GMD of the NNPC. I thank all Nigerians for their concern, love, and prayers over my husband's health status. And indeed, soon after, the GMD managing director came and he hinted to the president that he actually briefed the president. And one of the latest information he gave was that oil production in Nigeria has peaked back to 2 million barrels a day. Meanwhile, Daily Trust says that it has cited the itinerary of the Federal Executive Council, and at 11 a.m. today, the president will be on seat to preside over the Federal Executive Council. The paper says that the president actually walked in the office yesterday, and among the brief was his hosting of the Attorney General of the Federation and the GMD of the NNPC. Also in Mina, three former Nigerian leaders, Olusegun Obasanjo, Ibrahim Babangida, and Abu Salami Abubakar, met in Mina on Sunday. There are no statements coming from the meeting, but the senator is telling Daily Trust that the meeting was not unexpected, and he says that there's a strong indication that they will visit Aso Villa anytime from now. Meanwhile, talking about the presidential initiative for the Northeast, the Senate yesterday heard from its ad hoc committee that the suspended Secretary of the Government of the Federation allegedly was paid 507 million, allegedly as kickback to a company allegedly linked to the suspended SGF. The amount were allegedly paid to Roller Vision Engineering Limited. Daily Trust said that the report, a copy of the report which it received, showed that 507 million was allegedly paid by Pine contractors into accounts, and the newspaper gave the detailed accounts and the name of the bank for which the alleged kickbacks were paid. The Senate is to consider the report today. Meanwhile, it may also be recorded that the 14 days given to the three-man vice president committee ends today, and there's every likelihood they too will submit their report on that inquiry today.
All right, let's return to the Authority newspaper. Let's take a look at the headlines on the front page of the Authority newspaper. Cliff already read the story about the fire, which is reported to have gutted the Oba of Lagos Palace. The details of that story can be found on page 4. Also on page 4, there is Governor Wike deserves support. That's according to the Sultan. Now, the lead story of the paper has a kicker: $4 million fraud. Federal government yet to move against the Ministry of Health officials with 2 riders to return the money to Global Fund for HIV and AIDS and a embezzled fund, evidence of systemic corruption, says donor agency. Now, those are the headlines we're taking in the meantime from the front page of the Authority newspaper. Cliff?
Yes, on Daily Thrust this morning, we'll have other stories on the front page. Lamido moved to prison and PDP kicks, with details on page 35. Daily Trust this morning, and also we have on business Dangote to invest 106 billion naira in sugar refining. But we have a picture story there. The Electoral Reform Committee Chairman, former Senate President Ken Ndamani, presents the Electoral Reform Report to the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, in Abuja. That was yesterday. And at the bottom of Daily Trust, we have mixed reactions over Obasanjo IPP Abdul Salam meeting. With details of the report on page 3 of Daily Trust. We have also ACF. Buhari needs prayers, not careless remarks. With details of the report on page 4. And oil production running at 2 million barrels per day. And NPC says, with details of the report on page 13. Well, you may have to come in here to look at other issues.
Let's talk of 2 stories that have been mentioned now. There was fire at Iga Idugara, the palace of the Oba of Lagos, but the vigilance of the Lagos Fire Service with the Federal Fire Service and that of Julius Berger were able to put out the fire. The fire started about 1:30, and by 3:30 it had been put out. It was on the 2nd floor of one of the apartments in the palace. It is reported that some regalia of the royalty had been touched by the fire, but apart from the mild confusion initially, there were no casualties. There is excitement galore in Sagamu. There is a large banner adorning the ancestral home of Pa Prince Daniel Adibambo Joshua. That is the ancestral home of the world champion now, Anthony Joshua. It is at Ijoku in Shagamu. There is also the picture of Anthony Olufemi Olasini Joshua. There is the British flag and also the green, white, green flag of Nigeria there.
Okay, can you talk briefly on the central bank sanctioning some banks and just allowing 8 to operate?
Well, this sanction is really to SME, small and medium enterprises, and which is an indication of the policy of government to make sure that the policy of empowering
small and medium
enterprises is carried out effectively. You will recall that it's part of the policy of government to ensure that the private sector plays critical role in the diversification of the economy that is carried.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. That's the much that we can take in our newspaper review segment today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on Africa's largest television network. We take a short break now. When we return, we'll have our guests joining us to discuss how to curb the menace of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Nigeria.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. So let the change begin from within. Look at you, oh Geruola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
From the south-south to the northeast, southeast to the northwest, southwest to the north-central, the Future Assured project and its components Get Involved is restoring hope to millions of Nigerian women and children.
We are actually doing a lot under Future Assured, the program of Her Excellency Mrs. Aisha Muhammadu Buhari. And I believe what we are doing so far is impacting positively on the lives of women and children in Nigeria, particularly those in the internally displaced camps across the nation.
Get Involved supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
This is still Good Morning Nigeria, and to set the stage for our discussion this morning, let's watch this background report by Ngozi Jude.
Weapons for protection and mass destruction during war. However, for wrong reasons, this is becoming a worry. The ugly trend of illicit arms proliferation along international borders has been of concern to the world. The United Nations consequently set up an agency to address the issue. The borders of West African region is one that has been identified to be open to the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, making it one that has more illicit arms in the wrong hands. The situation has caught the attention of the regional body ECOWAS, which has moved to check the situation. Nigeria, which is said to abhor about 60% of such weapons, has equally set up a presidential committee on small arms and light weapons, which has been in the forefront for the passage of PRESCOM bill into law. PRESCOM, in collaboration with the United Nations Development Programme UNDP, the European Union EU and the ECOWAS Commission, have since 2013 been working to stem the rise in small arms importation into the country. The persistent message is for all hands to be on deck to sensitize civil society organizations in the southwest zone on combating the upsurge of the proliferation of illicit small arms and light weapons in Nigeria. However, with several protocols by member nations, the situation seems to have defied solution, as it is said to be high still. In 2016, the United Nations raised an alarm over the illicit proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Nigeria, with about 350 million, or 70% of an estimated 500 million of such weapons circulating in West Africa to be in the country. Saturated with these illicit weapons, unauthorized non-state actors are now threatening the existence of the country as well as lives and properties of the people. Consequently, this man-made monster has had an impact on peace and security, threatening not only the existence of the country, but millions of people across the continent. At the 2016 National Consultation on Fiscal Security and Stockpiles Management, analysts revealed that Nigeria is one of the countries experiencing some of the most devastating effects of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons as a result of spillover effect of the crisis in Libya and Mali, as well as unresolved internal conflicts in different parts of the country. With the aftermath of deaths and serious injuries, the situation, experts say, required an urgent need for solution. Analysts therefore believe this must be directed through the effective management of the armory and weapon stockpiles. They stress that the unsecured stocks and ineffectively managed stockpiles contribute to the illicit flow of these arms to terrorists and other criminal groups like Boko Haram, Niger Delta militants, and kidnappers. Committed to dismantling the proliferation of illicit arms trade along the borders in the West African sub-region, Nigeria has demonstrated a resolve by signing and ratifying the relevant international, regional and sub-regional instruments and legal regimes on the subject of small arms and light weapon control. But with the Nigeria Firearms Act of 1959, analysts believe the law is obsolete and ineffective in the face of the 21st century security challenges. How then will this challenge be addressed? Who monitors the production of these weapons, and why has it become easily accessible? These and more are what guests will be tackling today. And good morning, Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much, Devin Gozi-Chude, for that elaborate background report as a precursor to our discussion this morning. Now, we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as at remote locations. At this time, first, we'd like to welcome the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, Ambassador Emmanuel Imohe. Ambassador Imohe, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then we also have with us here in the studios Dr. Sani Adamo is a program officer, small arms and light weapons at the ECOWAS Commission. Dr. Adamo, I'm delighted to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And also here with us in the studios is an Assistant Commissioner of Police, Tolani Alausa of the Counter-Terrorism Unit, and it's also a member of the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons. ACP Alausa, pleasure to have you join us.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Cliff.
Well, with three guests in the studio here, we'll move on now to Lagos studio, where we have from the Department of Political Science, Babcock University, Mr. Michael Ogu. Mr. Ogu, it's a pleasure to have you join us.
Very much. Good morning.
Also have from our Sokoto studio, Ibrahim Abdullahi of the Department of Private and Public Law, Uthmani Danfodio University. It's a pleasure to have you, Malam Abdullahi.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, well, so now may cast, coincidentally. Let's begin the conversation by first getting the views of Ambassador Imohe, who is the chair of the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons. Your committee has been at work, for some years now. How much of an impact has it made, and why is it that we still continue to hear about the proliferation of small arms and light weapons? Ambassador Imohe.
Thank you very much. That's a question we get asked from time to time by so many people. The truth of the matter is that the problem we are talking about is a problem that has been with us for a very, very long time. And we, at the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, we have sought to make meaningful impact on the situation. Now, when we were inaugurated into office, our first priority was to actually do an appraisal of the extent of proliferation that we have in the country. We did first by looking at doing content analysis of the issue of proliferation of small arms and light weapons, which was submitted to government. And then we decided to follow up with an actual survey on small arms and light weapons. And this we have done in the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria. Now, right now, the outcome of that survey, the figures and the data that we have collected are being interpreted, and very soon we'll be submitting same for national stakeholders validation. Now, and aside from the survey itself, because the survey is not the end in itself. We have to utilize the survey in order to come up with a national action plan on small arms and light weapons control. Now, we have, on a yearly basis, we bring out a yearly program. And the yearly program that we have, the programs really articulate the priorities for the given year in response to the problem of proliferation of small arms and light weapons. Right now, for this year, our focus is on physical security and stockpile management. This is targeted at governmental agencies that are responsible for the national stockpile: the military, the police, security agencies, and so on and so forth. And these are the people who take custody of the national stockpile. We want to ensure that the weapons that are in their possession are well kept and kept in very conducive environments, and that the staff responsible for managing and handling these weapons have the right type of training, and that all the necessary conditions that are implicit in good care of weapons have been taken care of. So this is what we have been doing. But right now, aside from emphasis on physical security and stockpile management, we are now moving into the aspect of physical, practical disarmament in the respective states by encouraging state governments to come on board by putting in place programs to mop up weapons from their respective communities. Programs of this nature are already on in a number of states. We have Rivers, for example. We have Benue, for example. We have, in the north, we have Zamfara State. We also have Katsina. As well as southeast, we have Imo State that have come on board and are implementing different types of amnesty program with a view to mopping up what we believe to be excess weapons that are in the hands of unauthorized persons in all the nooks and crannies of this country.
Well, Ambassador Mohe, thanks a lot for the background information you just given as to what work the Presidential Committee is doing and the steps that you have taken. But how much of a dent has the committee made, or how much of a dent have we seen as a result of the impact, as a result of the work of others, including the practical disarmament we have seen, say, in parts of the Niger Delta, as well as Rivers? I'm asking this question against the background of some rather scary figures. I mean, last year the UN was indicating that we had millions of small arms and illicit weapons in Nigeria. What does your committee know for a fact with regard to perhaps, guesstimates as to say, look, we have so many small arms and light weapons in the country, and therefore how to begin to tackle them and where they are mostly located?
Thank you very much. The UN figures that we came across, I think, in the neighborhood of 350 million weapons or so, and we were greatly alarmed. We have also taken the liberty to seek to correct those figures at the different fora, given the opportunities that we have. The figures, the statistics tell us that there are 390 illegal weapons circulating worldwide. If 390 million illicit weapons are circulating worldwide, and if 390 million illicit weapons are estimated to be circulating worldwide, it is unthinkable that we imagine that 300 million of these are in Nigeria.
Or even 350.
Or 350. It is simply an overstatement, which we have tried to correct. Now, the conservative estimate of weapons in Africa, illicit weapons in Africa, are about 100 million. And out of this 100 million, West Africa is said to have about 30 million. And Nigeria is estimated to have between 1 to 3 million illicit small arms and light weapons in circulation. But of course, this estimate that I'm talking about were put together before the Boko Haram militancy, before the Boko Haram terrorist activities in the northeastern flank of Nigeria, and also before the militancy in the Niger Delta. And I think that these two factors will have significantly increased the number, but I don't think to the extent of 350 million illicit weapons.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Let's go to Sani Adamu. Sani Adamu, you are for ECOWAS Commissioner, and you've dwelt so much on small arms and light weapons over these years, trying to follow the trend in West Africa. And West Africa is becoming a bit notorious on that, looking at the statistics which has been debunked by Ambassador here. What picture do you make of small arms and light weapons in the ECOWAS region?
Yeah, thank you.
And what are the sources?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for having me here, firstly, and also for the question. Already, Ambassador Imohe gave some overview of some of the key challenges. In West Africa, we have multidimensional sources in terms of the proliferation of weapons. Firstly, the borders are porous. So many factors accounting for this porosity of our borders. The border security operatives are not having the required trainings. The equipment that is supposed to provide surveillance for our borders are not either there or they are inadequate. Another very important factor, which is also accounting for the proliferation, is the artisanal production of weapons. In West Africa, we have rich preponderance of artisanals that are producing these weapons. And I'm happy with the background that you gave. 40% of recovered weapons, particularly in Nigeria, for example, it was highlighted, of artisanal production. What that entails is that a lot of efforts probably have not been, done to be able to tackle and also recognize the presence of these local artisanals that are producing weapons. Ordinarily, the artisans that we have, they are supposed to produce farm implements. They are supposed to maybe provide facilities in some of our hospitals, maybe hospital beds and so on. But if the government or the governments in the region are not actually supporting them to be able to get this equipment purchased from them, they are now devoting time to be able to produce sophisticated weapons. Most of the weapons that are being imported, these artisanals are having these production capacities to be able to replicate them. The third aspect that I think is also fundamentally important, which Ambassador Imohe earlier highlighted, is the poor storage facilities in our national stockpiles. The statutory stockpiles in the armed forces in some of the services are poor, and therefore a lot of challenges are associated with that. So on the whole, West Africa is facing challenges of proliferation of small arms because of these multidimensional factors and efforts must be in place to be able to address them.
Other than Nigeria that you talked about, which other countries are most impacted by the proliferation of small arms and light weapons? I mean, everybody keeps talking about Mali, Mali, Mali. Whereas in West Africa, do you have a preponderance of illicit small arms and light weapons?
Yeah, it's virtually the whole of the 15 member states are affected. You remember the crisis in the Mano River Union Basin? All the countries in the Mano River Union had one cause of crisis or the other. 10 years of civil war in Liberia, 10 years of civil war in Sierra Leone. The impact is still with them. Of course, we're happy that at the post-crisis level, most of these countries that have gone through this crisis have actually taken giant steps in terms of addressing and putting in place national structures that will allow them to effectively control small arms and light weapons. The crisis in Cote d'Ivoire recently, a lot of things happened there, and we're happy today, as I'm talking, a lot of national efforts are in place to be able to address issues of controlling small arms in Cote d'Ivoire. So the impact is widespread in the region, but there are specificities in terms of national efforts to address them.
All right, Dr. Sani Adamu, thank you very much. Let's bring in ACP Tolani Alausa into the conversation at this time. It's also a member, as we indicated, of the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons. ACP Alausa, one of the issues I would like you to address first, I'm sure you want to speak to others, is the point that has been made. They say about 40% of the small arms and light weapons found illegally in Nigeria are in fact produced locally. Ambassador Mohe was saying before Boko Haram and before the militants in the Niger Delta, we had about 1 to 3 million of such small and light weapons in the country. Now, if you take 40%, even of say 2 million, 40% of 2 million, you will require a major industry to be able to produce that. But the fact, according to Dr. Sani Adamu, is that, well, these are artisanal producers. Is it that the police authorities and your sister security agencies are unaware of the production of illegal small arms and light weapons in the country, or they have not been able to get on top of the situation even though they are aware?
Thank you very much for this question. I don't want to contravene my colleague, but what we're talking of, when we talk of small arms and light weapons, we're actually talking of weapons like AK-47 and that caliber. But when you talk of artisanal production in Nigeria, you have what we call the Oka-made. Oka-made is all these locally fabricated double-barrel shotguns, which are not what...
They don't follow the classic definition.
Yes, they don't follow the definition.
But they are as effective in killing, for instance.
Yeah, they're effective, but the proliferation of such is not what we are talking about here. When you talk of shotguns, yes, it's double-barreled. You have to load. But you're talking of AK-47, which is what is prevalent in the region. We have had crises, like he said, in Liberia, in Mali. Those weapons we're talking about are the ones that come in from the offshore. They're the ones that are really in circulation. So it is not like the Nigerian police or our sister security organization do not know where these people make these small arms. We have them in Onitsha. No police in Onitsha. In Anambra State, sometimes go to raid them. I mean, they call it Oka-made. So the police is aware of such small pockets of, because if you're talking of the number we're talking about, 2 million, can 2 million AK-47 be produced in Nigeria without the authority of Nigeria knowing? So we're talking about these arms that are used very much in the theaters of war. That is the AK-47 and other big arms and ammunition.
Oh, well, I think you're raising an issue there. Even those ones, like Kingsley pointed out, could kill. And once it can kill, no matter how local it is, I expect the security agencies to be on top of it. But now let's go to Lagos, where we have our good friend who is of the Department of Political Science, Michael Ogu. Michael Ogu, as a political scientist who has given more time to strategic studies and looking at the issues being raised there and the havoc caused by light weapons, light arms, and small arms and light weapons. What is your position on the developments in Nigeria and, in fact, West Africa?
All right. My position is simple, actually. I would begin with the ACP's definition, of small arms and light weapons. He was mentioning the fact that small arms have to do with AK-47 and, all of those caliber of weapons. And my thoughts exactly is the definition of small arms, seems to me to have been very, very deficient, because there's this argument in literature, of course, which several scholars have advanced, that the definition of small arms might not necessarily be adequate. When you talk about small arms, of course, the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs, provides a definition, and several other agencies and authorities provide definitions of small arms as being arms that can be carried and used by one individual, and then, of course, they go ahead to make examples like shotguns, shoulder arms, and all of these kinds of weapons. And then one wonders, what happens to the crude weapons? Machetes, what happens to knives, what happens to daggers, and even sticks, as ridiculous as it may sound. These weapons, as it were, or these instruments can also be weapons when it's time for conflict situations. And it is important that they are also catered for. We must not in moving forward lose sight of the past. And of course, if you look at in 2010 or 2012 thereabout, there was a religious crisis in Jos where over 500 people were killed, with machetes, and there was a mass burial for this number of people. And so we must not categorically classify small arms as only AK-47 sophisticated weapons. We must also bring in these other crude weapons in quotes that are also able to cause the same level of damage, and also wreak the same level of havoc, and of course, in our attempt to address the proliferation of small arms, we must bring in these as well and see how do we ensure that these artisans who produce machetes and who produce jackknives and all these things, how do we ensure that we regulate these things as well? Because as insecurity increases, the likelihood of these things to be used, as crude as they are, to be used in causing havoc or causing harm to the next person, also increases, and that should also be a source of concern for every agency that is responsible for that proliferation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ogu. I think from there, let's get to Sokoto, where we have Ibrahim Abdullahi of the Department of Private and Public Law, Usmani Danfodio University, because we're talking about small arms and light weapons here, and if we have the appropriate law to address that. And the law referred to in our background report is talking about way back 1959. Would you see this as responsible for our inability to really be on top of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons?
Not really think so. This is because the issue of small arms and light weapons have been with Nigeria for a very long period of time, dating back from the colonial period. The mere fact that we have the Firearms Act of 1959 relates to the fact that Nigeria had small arms and light weapons problems. Even though the law from certain quarters have been held to be obsolete in nature, the problem does not actually have to do with the law, but rather in implementing the provisions of the law and in addressing the core issues that has to do with the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And that is why I say when you talk about demobilization, disarmament as well as reintegration process. It cannot be successful if you do not address the core causes of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, which regrettably most governments in the past have failed to do, which shows why this problem has continued. Now, with respect to the law itself, even though the provisions relating to the law is there, you find out that enforcement becomes a problem. For example, under the Firearms Special Provisions Act, being in possession of firearms attracts a penalty of 20,000 naira upon conviction or a term of 10 years imprisonment. But how many people have been brought under this particular law? How many people have successfully been arraigned before a court of law and convicted under this provision of the law? What we find is that you find spate of armed robbery cases. Police arraigned suspects before the court of law and they arraigned them for armed robbery, forgetting that being in possession of firearms itself is easy to prove and easy to secure a conviction, rather than you just relying on the issue of armed robbery, which becomes very difficult sometimes to secure a conviction. So I think the non-implementation or taking advantage of certain provisions of the Firearms Special Provisions Act has been the bane of the problem as far as the issue of enforcement is concerned.
All right, Ibrahim Abdullahi, thank you very much for your comments. We'll return to you later on in the course of the conversation to explore further the issue of law enforcement or appropriate legislation with regard to how we can tame the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. I want us to go back to Dr. Ogu at our Lagos Network Center. Dr. Michael Ogu, you responded earlier to the comments made by ACP Alausa with us here in the Abuja studios, giving a conceptual clarification of what small arms really are. But let's move away from that. Do we have an indication of the mapping, for instance, of small arms and light weapons? Assuming Nigeria, in fact, produces by artisanal means or otherwise some 40% of whatever small arms and light weapons that we have in the country, and then the other 60% come into the country. Mali, of course, is not a particularly wealthy country, so is Mali a producer or is a corridor? Libya wasn't producing arms here. Of course, we had stockpiles of weapons under the late Muammar Gaddafi. What do we know in terms of the global mapping of, one, the production of small arms and light weapons, and then the routes by which these small arms and light weapons are trafficked? Do we know the popular or unpopular gun runners in the world, or in Africa, or in Nigeria?
All right. Speaking about the trafficking of small arms, of course, globally, the developed world, happens to be some of the very major manufacturers of sophisticated arms. The U.S., Russia, perhaps France, and those other kinds of countries are the ones who manufacture in sufficient number these small arms, and of course, for several uses: national security, exportation, and so on and so forth. And so we would want to think that small arms come from these countries, and of course, some other countries also manufacture. South Africa manufactures, what other country now? And several other countries, of course, in North Africa and also in some parts of West Africa manufacture. It doesn't matter how sophisticated this manufacture is, but we know that there is some kind of manufacture that goes on. And just like you said, Mali and these other West African countries might be more of a corridor than manufacturers. They might be more of a corridor where these weapons come in. And let's not also forget that weapons that come into these countries, Mali, Libya, and so many of these other countries that they come into, this other man, the other doctor they mentioned, he mentioned Sierra Leone, he mentioned Liberia. These countries that have gone through an extended period of conflict, also when the conflicts are ended, some of these arms diffuse into other neighboring countries. So they are not necessarily manufactured there, but they just diffuse, and then they find a way of selling off some of them, perhaps of transporting them as it were through whatever channel is available to countries that might be needing. Because of course there is a push and pull relationship when it comes to arms proliferation. Something pushes, and of course there is a demand, where where these arms are sent to. Okay, so we might not have West African countries sufficiently manufacturing sophisticated weapons, but of course they serve largely as a corridor. And for local manufacture, of course, there are several areas in Nigeria. The ACP already mentioned Onitsha. You know, there are several other states in Nigeria. You have Abia State. I think you have Ebonyi State too. You know, where these weapons are manufactured locally. You know, and of course, like you said, it doesn't matter how sophisticated or how low the sophistication is, they are also able to cause damage and claim lives, you know, and properties as well.
Dr. Michael Ogo of Babcock University, we thank you so much for those comments. We'll now come back to Ambassador, because you've had this issue, the need to draw a line between the corridors and the manufacturers as to nip it in the bud, because if we're not able to identify this, with the proliferation causing a lot of havoc and crisis in parts of the country, I don't sure we'll be able to implement those good policies that should ordinarily impact positively on the lives of the people in terms of prosperity. What is your committee doing along that line? Because you talked about submitting a situation report, you know, on small arms and light weapons. Would you want to talk along that line?
Oh, yes. But before then, please permit me.
Okay.
To respond to the point raised by the gentleman from Lagos who was talking about other categories of weapons, knives, gloves, and other things. They are also weapons, and they are deadly. They can kill.
That's right.
Yeah, but they are no firearms, and our focus is on firearms. I think that we should also, I'd like us to reach a common understanding on the notions of small arms as well as light weapons. The definition of small arms and light weapons has been enunciated by the United Nations UNODA. And this, the definition enunciated by UNODA has been adopted by very many organizations. ECOWAS, for example, has adopted very many of these definitions. When you talk about small arm, you are talking about an individual weapon, either an AK-47 or a pistol that somebody can use as an individual unit. One person using a weapon, that's a small arm.
That's right.
Now, light weapon on the other hand, a weapon that can be used by 2-3 persons working as a crew, that would be a light weapon. That's the definition from UNODA, and this definition has been adopted by ECOWAS and other regional organizations. Now, on the issue of you talked about the report. Indeed, we submitted the report. And the report that we submitted enabled us to take a decision to do an actual survey. That actual survey has been done. At the moment, we are collating and interpreting the results. At the end of it, we are going to publish the outcome in a book form, which will be circulated to stakeholders.
So can you give us a little insight into this report, because it will be of help here?
Yeah, well, I can't speak in, I cannot speak in generalities. I would rather
maybe the high points.
Yeah, well, the high point really, the bottom line is that Nigeria is awash with weapons.
All right, Ambassador Imohe and then Dr. Sani Adamu. Again, let me, Cliff asked that question. I would like you gentlemen to take this issue. When you look at the, drug trade, for instance,
yes.
We know where they say, oh, you have the triangle where it is produced somewhere in Asia. You also have them in South America, and then Nigeria, of course, has been pilloried as a corridor where you have traffickers and so on and so forth. Do we have such an idea with regard to the production of small arms and light weapons, and who the dealers in these weapons are? Because I don't think that these are necessarily items you can go pick up from the shelf. Yes, in the U.S., if you are of a certain age and you meet certain other criteria, you can then go, and then, pick up a small arm or a light weapon. They have their own issues. But for you to then export, it becomes a different challenge. What do we know about those who are producing these weapons and shipping them to Africa, to West Africa, and now to Nigeria, where you say we are awash with these weapons, so that if we need to then launch a campaign to say, look, stop the producers, stop the traffickers, stop, you know, who the gun runners are. Perhaps we might be getting somewhere, Ambassador Mohe, and then Dr. Sani Adamu.
Thank you very much. Every producer nation of weapons, every producer nation has a database of people who are trading in such weapons. And in the same vein, every country that is importing weapons also has a database of individuals within that country that are either licensed or that are engaged in importation of weapons into the country. Now, if you ask us in Nigeria, of course, there is a list. We do have we have a list of individuals who are registered to get involved in such a trade. But we also have, aside from these individuals, there are also others that are not licensed at all, who are in the business of smuggling these weapons. Maybe buying from third parties, but they are in the business of smuggling these weapons in country, taking advantage of the porous nature of the borders. And you know, Nigeria has very extensive and very porous, both maritime as well as land borders. And these porous borders lend themselves to smuggling of weapons and other contraband. So, in terms of mapping, if we put our minds to it, yes, of course, such a map can be gotten. We do have it.
All right, Dr. Sani Adamu.
Yeah, in addition to what Ambassador Imo has said, as you know, the ECOWAS Convention on Small Arms and Light Weapons is in place. Member states are supposed to implement key provisions of the convention. Firstly, arms transfers into the region are regulated within the convention. All member states that are supposed to import weapons are supposed to apply to ECOWAS Commission to seek for exemption, because Article 3 of the ECOWAS Convention clearly stated that all member states should stop importing weapons in the region. Meaning, all weapons that are supposed to be imported will have to be, exempted before a member state is allowed to import. But for legitimate national security needs, meaning there are three main conditions that will allow the exemption to be provided. Firstly, if a country is to procure these weapons for legitimate national security needs, if a country is deploying for peace support operations, for example, peacekeeping operations are operations that you need to deploy not only the men, but also the equipment. And the third point is, if a country is enforcing public order, if you have challenges maybe around election periods, a country can apply and they will seek for exemption. So these are some of the critical, provisions that are in the convention. But the question is, are member states, for example, they are expected to put in place database? Any of these weapons that are imported, they are supposed to put in place a database that will allow them to, take records of these weapons. Are they actually doing it? These are some of the pertinent questions. So the ECOWAS Commission has put in place this framework for effective implementation of arms control in our member states. Some of the provisions, including national implementation frameworks, meaning you have to have a dedicated national structure that will allow you to effectively control, at the national level, activities related to small arms proliferation. But like I said, for you to establish effective mapping, now coming back to your question, for you to establish effective mapping of how these weapons are circulating in the region, you need to undertake, a baseline studies, a baseline research, which Nigeria has started. It's important for Nigeria, if it's a quantitative research, certainly at the end of the research undertaking, we'll be able to get, in statistical terms, the number of weapons that are available in the region. ECOWAS Commission supported the other member states to also undertake this research baseline studies. Okay. Quantitatively and qualitatively, you know, we are waiting for some of the outcomes of this research undertaking, and as soon as that is happening, I mean that happens, we should be able to get in clear terms the quantitative nature of this threat as well as the qualitative nature of the threat. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Sanya Adamu. When I go to ASP Tolani Alausa, because you are the ACP, you are in charge of counter-terrorism unit at the force headquarters in Abuja. And when we're talking about drawing a line, trying to identify the supply chain, the lines and the barons, those behind it. We saw what happened with the Niger Delta militancy, you know, in that area. We know what is happening with Boko Haram insurgency and other uprisings, pockets of uprisings here and there. Would you want to look at it from this perspective that we're talking about now? How much has the police done along that line in trying to define this and identify these very major players and routes?
Thank you very much. This topic is really a wide range topic. The Nigerian police, it's constitutionally meant to provide law and order, prevent and maintain. Now, getting the chain, it has to do with the border points, the immigration, the customs.
You don't share intelligence in any way? Or do you work in isolation?
We do at some level. But when these weapons are coming into Nigeria, they come in from the border posts. If the police is alerted that so and so things are coming into this country, of course, there will be joint operations, because there was a case in Lagos where the CP Lagos, in collaboration with other security agencies, went to Aleppo. I think it was Aleppo, and
Aleppo.
Sorry.
Aleppo is in
yes, Aleppo.
It's in the Middle East.
Okay, so they went in there as a joint security outfit, and they were able to break into that system. But what we have now, the police is internally supposed to maintain law and order, while things coming in into Nigeria are the direct responsibility of the immigrations and the customs. Of course, Nigeria has police has men, you have men at the border patrol, but the checks is mainly by the customs and the immigration.
So, Tolani, wouldn't you look at it from this perspective? Somebody is behind the importation of these arms. Those people live in Nigeria, or maybe outside. They cannot operate entirely from outside of the country. You mean you don't have data to identify these people, as to say, watch the operations and possibly their links?
The present Inspector General of Police has laid emphasis on information from the public. We need the cooperation of the public to be able to identify, because if
at present there are no records of that.
There are no. I can't precisely say there are records of people that are into this illicit business, but we're seeking the cooperations of the general public. Anytime they have information on the inflow of arms and ammunition, they should alert the Nigerian police.
Well, all right, ACP Tolani Alausa, thank you very much. Of course, there are other perspectives to take from this, and we have reactions coming in from our viewers who have taken advantage of the Twitter handle. You can see that at the lower left-hand corner of your screen at NTA GMA. We take some of those tweets now, and of course, we'll expect some others to come. Daily Jack Solomon says, proper management of national small arms stockpiles is essential to curbing the illicit trade. Need for security management practices.
And Chris Simon writes, the proliferation of small arms and light weapons have contributed to high rate of militancy, Boko Haramism, and other forms of criminality.
Now, this is from Franklin Ofoma. Franklin Ofoma tweets, what are you talking about, he asks. Porous borders are to blame. Now, there's increasingly little or no synergy between the security agencies.
And Festus Akimboiwa writes that Nigeria is sitting on a keg of gunpowder if government fails to tackle the proliferation of small arms and light weapons and the threat they cause.
And this is from Alagbala Taiwo. It says the major question that needs answer is how small arms get into the hands of unauthorized persons.
And Sani Michael Omokaji writes that proliferation of arms and light weapons is our society. Further exposes leadership failure and how endemic corruption has gone.
And Eugene Uche tweets, local artisans should be encouraged and regulated to enhance local production of guns and ammunition.
And Festus Kimboiwa writes again, how are we sure that some of the small arms and light weapons in Nigeria are not acquired from corrupt government officials and military officers?
Shani Makalomakoji again says our borders need to be overhauled in order to curb this crime.
And Dele Jack Solomon writes that preventing illicit arms transfers requires the adoption of policies, procedures, and practices aimed at controlling their import, export, and users.
Shakiru Raufu tweets, said the cause of proliferation of weapons is the bargaining between the elites and security men. Whistleblowers should be introduced.
And Franklin Ofoma writes, it is known that small and light weapons are easy to conceal and transport, inexpensive and not easy to track due to expanding block markets.
All right, well, those are the tweets that we'll take in the meantime from our viewers. Just before we go back to our Sokoto Network studios to get the legal perspective on what needs to be done, I would like Ambassador Imohe to also speak to this point. Now, since we're still on the, it appears that we're still on the process of seeking to map, the route of production, illicit importation, which will be smuggling, and therefore the gun runners. There's a point that some commentators have also drawn attention, namely that what you find is, yes, the police authorities are empowered to issue licenses for the possession of firearms. And the firearms that you can possess on the basis of the licensing is regulated. In other words, the caliber is regulated. But the police authorities will issue you with a license for a certain category of a weapon, but then people now use that as an excuse, to acquire higher caliber weapons, if not more quantity. Is your committee aware of this? And if so, what is being done? And this is particularly common. What I've just said is common amongst, those who, of course, who hire political thugs and then, the other criminal gangs that are running around in different parts of the country.
Thank you very much. I think it is a possibility that someone could acquire a particular kind of license and yet use that same license to attempt to bring in different kinds of weaponry that are not specified in the license that he has. But if that happens, that is pure criminality. And if the person is caught, then the full weight of the law should apply. I think we are talking about law enforcement issues here. I have to comment on the questions you were asking of the ACP. Now, I don't understand, I don't really see how it is possible for the police to have that kind of data. It is the Nigerian Customs Service that will have that data. Now, in an environment where we share information and share intelligence, I think that was the point the gentleman was saying. Now, this data from the Nigerian Customs Service should be shared with relevant security service, including the Nigerian Police Force. Now, I think that the Nigerian Customs Service is doing a very good job, and I have to commend their heightened state of awareness in this day and age, especially exemplified by the recent seizure of over 600 pump-action weapons. And so, the Customs Service is doing a wonderful job. Whatever information they have, whatever data they have, should be shared with other agencies. We don't have any evidence that they are not doing that. So it is for the police, if they don't have any of this information, it's for the police to liaise with the Nigerian Customs Service to be updated on a regular basis on data available to Nigeria Customs Service.
Okay, let's go next to Sokoto. Thank you, Ambassador Emmanuel Imohe. We'll still come back to you. Let's go to Sokoto, where we have Ibrahim Abdullahi, who has written a lot of pieces on small arms and light weapons. Recently, the federal government is talking about extending the whistleblowing policy to small arms and light weapons. Looking at your research and what you've written on this, to what extent do you think this can impact on efforts of government to stem the tide of proliferation of light weapons?
To a great extent, it will assist in no small measure. For example, sometimes it is advisable for one to use unorthodox means in trying to reach to a particular destination. We have seen how the whistleblowing has actually aided the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in trying to recover illegal monies or loot from corrupt public officials. If the same method can be adopted, taking into consideration that sometimes it's very difficult for you to actually trace these illicit small arms and light weapons, but of course the production of these illicit small arms and light weapons are known to the individual citizenry, they are known to the populace. If they are promised a reward, definitely some of these things will be a thing of the past and will continue achieving some results. And I share the belief and the whistleblowing as expressed by the Minister of Defense in respect to seeing how this can be used in order to achieve the desired results. So it is a welcome development.
Thank you, Ibrahim Abdullahi, for that perspective. This is still Good Morning Nigeria, where we're looking at small arms and light weapons. We'll continue with this conversation in a moment.
Olachi, come and receive your punishment.
I'm sorry, ma.
Olachi, come on.
I am something. You mostly depend on me for the smooth running of the domestic activities of your family.
Make sure you prepare food. That rug in the visitors' room.
Yes, ma.
Wash it thoroughly because that thing has been smelling.
I am a helper in your family and business. Many times you thank me with a slap.
I said it. Good.
House help, gateman, sales girl, PA, and so on. This week, Professor John Bull takes a deep look at issues of assistance in life jackets. It is funny.
I doesn't want that.
This man, they look forward to give belly.
It is deep.
Showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network International and Star Times.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Globe.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
TV Guide magazine is out with fabulous Fab Funke Akindele Bello, aka Jennifer, adorning the cover. She opens a secret not known even to her family. Find out the secret. NTA turns 40 this year. The challenges, the emerging trends in broadcasting, and the way forward. Weekend Dealer 2. Meet the team behind the biggest deal on NTA. Is food still the way to a man's heart? If not, what else? This edition is hot and juicy. Meet your star faces on screen. Entertainment, fashion, young minds, social media, and great personality.
This is idiosyncratic and heterodox.
Yes, Professor John Bull is on the radar. Find out what makes this program the rave of the moment on NTA Network. And for the Prof,
over and out.
TV Guide. Ask your vendors or book your copy at every NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, still your indispensable companion.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the Office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have all our guests with us here in the Abuja studios, as well as at our Lagos and Sokoto network centers. Now, just to return to our Lagos network studios, Dr. Michael Ogu. Dr. Michael Ogu, my colleague Cliff asked a question earlier regarding the proposed adoption of the whistleblower policy with regard to seeking to get information on where illicit small arms and light weapons may be buried, or who the importers might be, who the gun runners might be. In your opinion, is this workable?
Yeah, well, the whistleblowing policy is becoming a very interesting mechanism, you know, in recent times, considering the advantage it has been in fighting corruption, you know, and I think it's going to also be useful in arms proliferation, or non-proliferation rather, you know. But I think there are other more there are several other aspects that can also be looked at, you know, in trying to reduce the proliferation of small arms in Nigeria. But the whistleblowing policy, yes, it's going to be a very laudable idea, and it might actually prove a lot significant.
All you've written, what are the other options you're talking about that could assist, you know, in stemming the tide of the proliferation of small arms?
All right, I was saying earlier that when it comes to small arms, there are actually push and pull factors, you know, and it seems that most times we are more concerned, or we lay more emphasis on the push factors than on the pull factors. And what do I mean by push factors? Push factors are factors that that encourage supply of small arms. You know, we have talked about porous borders, we have talked about corruption at various levels, and the fact that people can get access to these arms either from government officials, either from law enforcement officers who are corrupt, you know, either from raids, you know, and several other things. Those are push factors. You know, they're factors that encourage supply of small arms. But the demand aspect is where I think much of the emphasis should lie. You know, why do people need small arms? Why do people want to have access to small arms? You know, why are people actually making every effort to ensure that they possess one kind of arm or the other? Insecurity. You know, people are poor. People need to get access to means of livelihood. People need to ensure that their lives are safe. You know, that if the government cannot ensure my safety, then I might as well do it myself and get an arm or get a small arm to do that. You know, so the pull factors rather should be where our emphasis should lie. You know, and perhaps I'll leave that for when we come to the solutions. You know, so I just think that we should also balance the equation, lay emphasis as well on what issues promote demand for these small arms, and when we do that, we are trying to balance the chain, so that we're not only looking at how do we curb supply, but how do we also curb demand for these small arms. That is also very, very important, I think.
We are talking about solution. What is the way forward? You know, given the pull and push factors that you've highlighted right now, how do we address that?
Talking about the way forward, there are several sides to, you know, looking for a solution. You know, and we have identified a few of them on the show. The whistleblowing, I think, is going to be a very, very laudable idea. And I think there's also the ECOWAS moratorium, ECOWAS Convention on Small Arms has encouraged, or has recommended rather, a national commission on the proliferation of small arms in member countries that have signed that moratorium. And Nigeria happens to be one country that has not yet, you know, fulfilled that condition. Yes, I appreciate the work that the Presidential Committee is doing, headed by Ambassador Imohe, with all due respect. But I think that it is important that we also get to the point where we are able to take the bold step and establish an independent commission, that's going to be independent and, having to run on its own, because right now I think, there are certain issues, there are certain policy actions and implementations that the presidential committee might not be able to take because, it doesn't have that independent status as prescribed by the ECOWAS moratorium. So I think that is also a very, very needed, step in the right direction. If we're able to establish that independent national commission, then we're sure that we're on the path, to see how we can tackle some of these challenges. Then number two is that we need to also improve the standard of living. People need to be sure that they're able to get food to eat. People must not be hungry, so hungry to the extent that they're pushed to go and look for arms or get food for themselves to eat, And people also need to be ensured that their lives are protected. If my life is protected, there was a newspaper publication sometime last year or so that owing to the incessant armed robbery in some parts of Lagos, certain families decided to purchase small arms. These are the pull factors we're talking about. Purchase small arms. Of course, they are not armed robbers. The families are not criminals, but they think that this is necessary to secure their own lives since the government has failed to do that on their behalf. Okay, so people need to be ensured that their lives are protected. And finally, there was a research I did in 2015, and amazingly, I discovered that proliferation of small arms is also aided by herding, cattle rearing. You find these herders move with a large amount of cattle across, desert, across forests, across, several places, which of course custom officers cannot get to, and it is very likely, from my research, it's very likely that arms are hidden, in certain compartments on the cattle. And so these arms are hidden in the cattle and they are moved across borders. And of course, nobody is able to detect, whether they are moved either through national borders or within the state, as it were. So we must pay attention to all of this little detail because, of course, like it has been said, the issue of arms proliferation is very complex, and we must begin somewhere to make intelligent and very, very specific actions, take specific actions to ensure that we're actually leading this challenge to the board.
All right, Dr. Michael Ogu of Babcock University, thank you very much for your contribution to our conversation this morning. You joined us from our Lagos Network studios. All right, let's quickly go over to our Sokoto Network Center. Ibrahim Abdullahi, of course, is still there. It's of the Department of Private and Public Law, Usman Dan Fodio University. Let's get your closing thoughts, particularly also dredging up issues that you found out in the course of your researching on this subject matter, either the causative factors of proliferation or in how the problem can be tackled much more effectively.
Now, some of the causes of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons can be as internal as well as external. When you talk about external, you are talking about international trade by the so-called developed countries of the world, because Nigerians that deal in illicit traffic of small arms and light weapons couldn't have done that without their European counterparts. But little wondered that most of them are not either arrested nor prosecuted. And internally, we have internal factors like internal manufacturing or local production, and you equally have what I will call black racketeering or insecurity, and you have organized crimes that take place within the country. Now, there are equally activities that encourages the use of these small arms and light weapons. We have issues bordering on workers' revolt, you have subversion, sabotage, you have religion crisis, you have communal clashes between tribes and what have you. All these are activities that propel the use of these small arms and light weapons. But I must say that if we look at the legislative framework for the protection of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, we now talk about the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Firearms firearms are provided for under the exclusive legislative list, which means that it is only the federal government that has the powers to make laws relating to firearms. But then, the Constitution have made provisions relating to environmental rights, political rights, and social rights. But there is no clear-cut provisions relating to right to security, which invariably means that all the environmental rights, all the social rights, all the political rights provided for has to do with aspirational rights provided for under Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999. And like the commentator from the Lagos studio said, everybody has the right to life under Chapter 4, but then your right to life is dependent on the provision, for example, of food or basic amenities of life. And this is encapsulated under Chapter 2 of the Constitution. But invariably speaking, Chapter 2 of the Constitution, notwithstanding that you have beautiful provisions there, they are not justiciable. And I think it is high time that we have a legislative activism or judicial activism that will make Chapter 2 of the Constitution to be justiciable, and that is the only way that you can now be having individuals clamoring or having a sense of the right to security. With regard to the issue of solutions, in 2013, there came into force the Arms Trade Treaty. The Arms Trade Treaty was a beautiful treaty to which Nigeria was a signatory. But Nigeria is yet to domesticate the Arms Trade Treaty of 2013, just like it did in respect to the Geneva Conventions. I think it is high time for Nigeria at the international palace at least to domesticate the Arms Trade Treaty into the Nigerian law, so that at least we will have a sense of international responsibility towards international arms trade. And similarly, the penalties provided for under the Firearms Act should equally be reviewed. For example, the issue of giving an option of fine for a person found to be in possession of firearms should be reviewed, so that you now have a stipulation whereby you give life imprisonment, and it should specifically be provided for that it should not be among the list of offenses that a pardon can be given. This will serve as a deterrent for anybody to attempt to be in possession of an illicit weapon. And similarly, corruption. Corruption has been the bane of Nigerians' problems. And I'm very happy that the present administration is trying to ensure that it cuts corruption down to nick corruption to the bud. What am I trying to say here is this: law enforcement agency, if they are corrupt, the issue of proliferation of small arms and light weapons will continue to exist. If individuals don't have a change of attitude, the issue of small arms and light weapons will continue to persist. So,
all right, Ibrahim Abdullahi there of the Department of Private and Public Law, Madam Fodio University, thank you very much for joining us from our Sokoto Network studios. We thank you. You raised a contentious point about the lack of explicit provision on security rights in the Constitution. That's contentious, by the way, because if you check out the various provisions in the Constitution relating to the establishment of certain bodies, the National Security Council, National Defense Council, the police force, the armed forces, all of those are security issues. Plus, of course, Chapter 2 that you talked about read together with Chapter 4. Thank you very much once again for being with us on the program today. You joined us, as I said, from our Sokoto Network Center. Now, to return to our Abuja studios, just one question for Dr. Sani Adamu. Dr. Sani Adamu, it's of course, a point that's always been articulated by commentators that post-conflict societies often are awash with small arms and light weapons. We have seen a number of conflicts in the West African sub-region. How has a country like Liberia or Sierra Leone dealt with the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in the aftermath of their conflicts, particularly Liberia?
Yeah,
very quickly.
Thank you for this question. The implementation framework, like I said earlier, is important. Any member state that is supposed to effectively control small arms proliferation, there has to be this strong political will by the government to put in place a national structure that will be given the right resources, the adequate resources that will allow implementation to happen. The key provisions in the ECOWAS Convention, for example, you have to be seen to be periodically collecting weapons, destroying weapons. You have to be seen to be, taking inventory of the statutory national stockpiles so as to be able to identify the obsolete among the stocks, so as to also be able to identify the excess. We have a lot of member states that have procured in excess of their national needs. There has to be this demonstration of political will to be able to symbolically, in some instances, destroy these weapons. Secondly, the legislative framework. We need to have an effective legislation, like most of the commentaries that took place. Without an appropriate legislation, certainly this fight will continuously be a fight that will keep doing it. So it's important that we domesticate, particularly international instruments, the UN Program of Action, the UN Firearms Protocol, the Arms Trade Treaty, the ECOWAS Convention. At the continental level, we have the silencing of the guns by 2020. It's an African Commission declaration. All member states are committed to these instruments. We're supposed to see our member states not only signing, ratifying these instruments, but physically and practically domesticating them and putting them in their national laws.
All right, Dr. Sani Adamu of the Small Arms and Light Weapons and the ECOWAS Commission, we thank you so much for your perspective to this very conversation. Because talking about the ECOWAS Convention and the compliance of member nations remain a question. Now, let's go to Ambassador Emmanuel Imohe. What is the committee, the presidential committee, doing going forward? You have a situation report on what is happening with regards to small arms and light weapons. How do you think we can check this? We're talking about Nigeria having the National Commission on this.
Thank you very much. Let me start from...
Just briefly, because time we can summarize.
Now, on the issue of the institutional framework, there is really a difference between a committee and a commission. Committee cannot have the powers and the resources available to a commission. If you have a commission, you are more in compliance with ECOWAS prescription on the issue. So the reason we do not have a commission in Nigeria at the moment is not because there is a lack of will, it's rather that the law is not yet in place, and we are working on it. We have crafted a bill which is presently with the Ministry of Justice, and if submitted to the National Assembly and passed, should enable Nigeria to put in place a commission instead of a presidential committee. Now, I think that on the issue of the existing law in Nigeria, someone made a comment about the 1959 law. Indeed, it's a 1959 law. That law is weak, especially from the point of view of the penalties available to people who commit infractions against that law. So, what have we done at the Presidential Committee? We have crafted a new law, a new firearms law that will repeal the existing one. And we have tried to build in all the prescriptions of the ECOWAS Convention of Small Arms and Light Weapons.
Ambassador Emmanuel Imohe, you know, time is no longer our friend. You've talked of what you're doing with regards to the National Commission and, of course, law to review what we have since 1959. I'd like to say special apologies to ACP Tolani Alausa because time is no longer our friend and we can't move on with your comments on that. But we have to thank you so much for being part of this conversation as from the perspective of counter-terrorism unit of the force headquarters, Nigeria Police. We thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And
all
we
right.
thank Dr.
Cliff, that does it for us.
Yes.
Ambassador Emmanuel Imohe and Dr. Sani Adamu of ECOWAS. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on the program today. We'll move on now to our complimentary segment, the first of which is sports. A virtuoso performance by Cristiano Ronaldo and Real Madrid saw to the humiliation of their city rivals Atletico in the first leg of the semi-final of the European Champions League. Let's go over now to our sports desk for details.
All right, thanks for joining us here. I'm Salih Abdullahi with the sports news. Super Eagles skipper John-Mikel Obi is expected to resume training at Tianjin Teda in the next 1 week, according to an official statement by the Chinese Super League club. The former Chelsea midfielder went under the knife, and the two operations were successful. The news that Mikel is on the road to recovery will be sweet music through the ears of Ghana Raw, as the Nigerian manager is expected to call him up for the African Cup of Nations qualifier against South Africa. In a revolutionary new proposal, European Athletes has recommended that all